Daniel had planned this moment down to the last detail. He picked her seat himself, front row, close enough that she'd feel every second. The guests were dressed. The flowers were perfect. 300 people waited on a manicured lawn for the most talked-about wedding of the year. And somewhere in the back of his mind, Daniel Whitmore was smiling, because he knew Emily Carter was on her way. He pictured her pulling up in something modest, maybe a little nervous, maybe trying too hard not to cry. He had no idea. Because at exactly 1:55, a sound cut through the quiet outside the venue. Low, powerful, unmistakable. The valet looked up. The guests near the entrance turned first. A black Lamborghini rolled to a stop at the velvet rope, doors swinging open like it owned the place. Out stepped two small boys in matching yellow. Then a woman in gold took their hands, lifted her chin, and walked forward without hesitation. If this story already has you hooked, hit that subscribe button right now. I've got another unforgettable story dropping tomorrow and you don't want to miss it. Drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're watching from. I love seeing our community light up from every corner of the globe. All right, back to it. Daniel saw her face. And for the first time in years, the most powerful man in the room had absolutely nothing to say. Emily Carter was 24 years old, and she married Daniel Whitmore. Back then, he wasn't the man on magazine covers. He was ambitious and driven, but still figuring it out. Emily believed in him before the world did. She was the one who stayed up late listening to his plans, the one who told him he could do it when he wasn't so sure himself. And for a while, that was enough. She turned down a promotion to move cities for his business. She learned the names of his clients, their wives, their children. She cooked the dinners. She smiled at the right people. She made their home feel like something worth coming back to. She gave that marriage everything she had. But somewhere along the way, Daniel stopped noticing. It wasn't one moment. It was 100 small ones. The way he'd come home and walk past her without really seeing her. The way his phone became more important than any conversation they had. The new friends who made her feel like she was dressed wrong, laughing too loud, taking up too much space. Daniel's world was getting bigger. And somehow, Emily kept shrinking inside it. She told herself it was just a busy season, that he was under pressure, that things would slow down and they'd find their way back to each other. She kept waiting. He never came back. One evening she made his favorite dinner, candles on the table, the apartment quiet and warm. She thought maybe tonight they could actually talk, really talk. Daniel sat down across from her, looked at the food, then looked at her. And she knew. Before he opened his mouth, she already knew. "I think we've grown apart," he said. His voice was calm, almost gentle, like he'd rehearsed it. "I think you deserve someone more suited to where you are." Emily didn't say anything. She just looked at him, at the man she had relocated for, sacrificed for, built her whole quiet life around. Suited to where you are. Not where he was going. He had already decided. The lawyers, she would later find out, had already been contacted. The papers were practically ready. This dinner wasn't a conversation. It was a notification. She nodded slowly, folded her hands in her lap, and somewhere deep inside her chest, something that had been holding on for a long time finally let go. She didn't beg, didn't cry in front of him. She just sat there, perfectly still, while her marriage ended over a meal she had cooked herself. What Emily didn't know yet, what she couldn't possibly know in that moment, was that Daniel walking away was not the worst thing that would happen to her. It was the beginning of something he would never be able to take back. The divorce was over in less time than it took Emily to accept that it was real. Daniel had lawyers ready, a full team prepared and organized like a project that had been in planning for months, because it had been. She understood that the moment she walked into the office and saw the papers already printed, already tabbed, already waiting for her signature in neat little rows. He had been planning his exit while she was still planning their future. She signed. He didn't look at her once. She walked out with a settlement that would cover maybe 6 months of rent if she was careful, and a silence agreement written in language she didn't fully understand until much later, when understanding it no longer changed anything. She found a small apartment, told herself it was temporary, unpacked only what she needed, lived out of boxes for 2 weeks like she was waiting for permission to actually settle in. Then one morning, she stood in the bathroom of that small apartment and stared at something small and plastic sitting on the edge of the sink. One word, unmistakable. Positive. She sat down on the floor. The bathroom was barely big enough to fit a person comfortably. The floor was cold. She sat there anyway, back against the wall, knees pulled up, and stared at the opposite wall for a very long time. Her mind went to Daniel immediately. That was the honest truth of it. Her first instinct, even then, even after everything, was to reach for her phone and call him, to tell him, to let him back into something, even if that something was complicated and frightening and completely unplanned. She picked up the phone. She found his name. And then she remembered his face in that lawyer's office, the way he had looked at the papers and not at her, the way he had signed his name like she was a transaction he was relieved to close. She put the phone back down. She sat with that decision for a long time before it fully became a decision. He had chosen to walk away from her like she was nothing. He had prepared for it quietly, carefully, and completely, without once giving her the dignity of an honest conversation. If he didn't want her, he didn't deserve what she was now carrying. She would do this alone. She didn't know yet how hard that would be. She didn't know what the next months would ask of her, or how many times she would sit in that same small bathroom and wonder if she had made the right call. But she made it anyway. Right there on a cold bathroom floor in an apartment she was still pretending was temporary, Emily Carter made the hardest decision of her life. And she made it by herself. The room was small and cold, and smelled like antiseptic. Emily stared at the ceiling while the technician moved the wand slowly across her stomach. She had told herself to stay calm, just get the information, deal with whatever came next. Then the technician turned the screen toward her. "Congratulations," she said with a small smile. "You're having twins." Emily blinked. "Twins." She laughed, a short, surprised sound that came out before she could stop it. Then her eyes filled with tears. Then she laughed again, louder this time, a little overwhelmed, a little terrified, a little something she didn't have a word for yet. 2 heartbeats, side by side on the screen, small and fast and impossibly real. She drove home in silence. She sat on her couch for a long time, hands pressed flat against her stomach, trying to understand what her life had just become. She had already been scared. She was already doing this alone. She had already told herself it would be hard. She had not planned for 2. But somewhere in the middle of that quiet apartment, something shifted. The fear was still there. She wasn't pretending it wasn't, but it moved, made just enough room for something new to sit beside it. Purpose. These 2 lives were counting on her, not on Daniel, not on anyone else, on her. She picked up her phone and called Jess. She told her everything. The pregnancy, the twins, the terrifying math of raising 2 Bobbies on her own with almost nothing. Jess was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. "Okay," she said, "then we figure it out together." That was it, no long speech, no hesitation, just we. Emily exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. The next morning, she got up early, made a list, found a part-time job posting that fit around doctor's appointments, applied before she could talk herself out of it. Then she opened her laptop and started researching childcare costs, small business grants, everything she'd need to know, and 100 things she hadn't thought of yet. She stopped letting herself look backward. Daniel had a new life. Fine, so would she. Slowly, carefully, she started building something, not because it was easy, because there was no other choice. And somewhere between the fear and the exhaustion and the list she made at 2 in the morning, she let herself imagine it. A life that was entirely hers. A life that was actually good. She had no idea, yet just how good it would become. But 2 small heartbeats were already pushing her in the right direction. And for the first time since the divorce, Emily Carter was moving forward. Nobody threw her a party when she figured it out. Nobody clapped when she landed her first client, a small birthday event for a woman who found her through a friend of a friend. Nobody noticed when she stayed up until midnight designing invitations on a free laptop program because she couldn't afford software yet. Emily wasn't doing it for applause anyway. Noah and Nathan arrived 6 weeks after she got that first job. Identical in every way, same nose, same loud cry, same habit of reaching for each other even in their sleep. She brought them home to a warm apartment with second-hand furniture and a crib Jess had helped her build wrong twice before they finally got it right. It was not the life she had imagined at 24. It was quieter, smaller, and somehow, against all the odds she had stacked up in her head, it was full. She built the business the same way she built everything else in those years. Slowly, carefully, one step at a time. She planned corporate dinners during nap time. She answered emails at 5 in the morning before the boys woke up. She took every job, even the ones that barely paid, because every job was a reference and every reference was a door. She didn't try to enter Daniel's world. She wasn't interested in his circles or his contacts or his version of success. She built something completely different. Then a tech startup hired her for a product launch. Then that client told another. Then a regional magazine ran a short feature on women-owned businesses to watch, and somehow that article got shared, and shared again, and kept going. Her inbox changed overnight. She sat at her kitchen table one morning, Noah and Nathan eating cereal on either side of her, and read through the new inquiries with quiet, wide eyes. Jess was there. She leaned over, read the screen, and looked at Emily without saying anything. She didn't need to. A few months later, Emily walked into a dealership. Not because anyone was watching, not to make a point. She just stood in front of the one that had caught her eye in a magazine she'd flipped through in a waiting room 2 years ago when she had almost nothing. Black, sleek, completely unreasonable. She bought it. Not for status, not for show, just because she could and because somewhere in the back of her mind she needed something solid and real that said, "You made it." She drove home with the windows down. The boys were at Jess's place. The road was wide open. She didn't think about Daniel once. But somewhere across the city, the universe was already lining up the moment when he would finally see exactly what she had become, and there would be nothing he could do about it. It arrived on a Tuesday morning between a utility bill and a package confirmation. A thick envelope, heavy paper, the kind that costs more than most people's groceries. Emily's name written in clean, gold lettering across the front. She almost didn't open it. Then she did. Daniel Whitmore and Victoria Sinclair cordially request your presence. She read it once, then again, then a third time slower, like the words might rearrange themselves into something that made more sense. Jess was sitting across the kitchen table with her coffee. She watched Emily's face and put the mug down. "What is it?" Emily turned the invitation around and slid it across the table without a word. Jess read it, looked up, read it again. "He invited you to his wedding." She shook her head slowly. "Why would he do that?" Emily already knew. She had heard things through people who still moved in Daniel's circles. Small comments passed along the way small comments always travel, quietly, and straight to the person they were meant to reach. Daniel had been telling people she never recovered from the divorce, that she was struggling, that she'd had a hard time moving on. He had built a version of her that was still sitting somewhere broken and small, waiting for her life to start. And he wanted her in that room, front row, a live reminder of everything he believed she still was, while he stood at the altar with someone younger, someone newer, someone who fit the image Emily never quite managed to be. It wasn't an olive branch. It was a trophy display, and she was supposed to be the exhibit. Emily set the invitation down on the table. For a moment, the kitchen was completely quiet. Then, from down the hallway, came the sound of Noah and Nathan chasing each other in loud, joyful circles, crashing into walls, laughing at nothing, completely alive. Emily looked up at the Lamborghini key sitting on the kitchen counter, black and small and solid. She thought about the late nights, the early mornings, the clients she charmed on 4 hours of sleep while 2 infants napped in the next room. The version of herself she had built from scratch with no one watching and no one helping and no safety net underneath her. Then she looked back at the invitation. And she smiled, slow, certain. RSVP, yes, she said. Jess stared at her. Emily. And I'm bringing the boys. Jess opened her mouth, closed it again. Then, after a long moment, a smile started pulling at the corner of her lips too. Because she understood. Emily wasn't going to cause a scene. She wasn't going to make a speech or start an argument or walk in looking for a fight. She was just going to show up. And that alone was going to be enough. Daniel Whitmore's wedding was not just a wedding. It was an event, 300 guests, a venue with marble floors and manicured gardens that had been booked 18 months in advance, press coverage, a photographer whose work regularly appeared in national magazines, the kind of occasion people talked about before it even happened. Victoria Sinclair had made sure of that. She was not a woman who did things quietly. The daughter of one of the city's most prominent real estate developers, Victoria understood image the way other people understood language, naturally, instinctively, fluently. She had spent 11 months planning every detail of this day. The flowers, the lighting, the guest list carefully curated to include exactly the right people. This wedding was not just a celebration, it was a statement. And Daniel, standing at the rehearsal dinner the night before, glass in hand, laughing easily with the men around him, was more than happy to let her make it. He looked comfortable in a way that only very wealthy, very confident men managed to look at large gatherings, like the room existed for him, like tomorrow was already his. His assistant appeared quietly at his shoulder. She leaned in close and told him that Emily Carter had RSVP'd. Daniel paused for just a moment. Then the smile came back, wider this time. Good, he thought, let her come, let her watch. He had imagined it more than once. Emily sitting in that front row seat he had specifically reserved for her, watching him say his vows, watching Victoria in her gown, watching everything he had built without her. He thought it would be the perfect ending to a chapter he was long done with. His assistant moved away. She did not mention the +2 on the RSVP card. She hadn't thought it was important. Across the city, in a warm apartment with crayon drawings still stuck to the refrigerator, Emily was pulling Noah and Nathan through their bedtime routine. Baths, pajamas, the usual argument about who got to pick the book. Where are we going tomorrow? Nathan asked, fighting a yawn. To a party, Emily said, smoothing down his hair. A fancy party, Noah asked. Very fancy. Are we gonna look nice? Emily smiled and kissed his forehead. We're going to look amazing. She tucked them in, turned off the light. Then she walked to the chair in the corner of her room where she had laid everything out carefully before dinner. The golden wrap dress, 2 small mustard yellow shirts, pressed and folded, 2 pairs of tailored shorts. She stood there for a moment, looking at it all. She thought about Daniel at his rehearsal dinner, laughing, certain, completely at ease. She didn't feel anger. She didn't feel nerves. She turned off the light and went to bed early. Tomorrow, she just had to show up. The wedding was supposed to begin at 2 o'clock. By 1:55, every seat was filled. The garden looked exactly the way Victoria had spent 11 months imagining it. White florals, soft music, 300 guests in their finest, all facing the aisle in quiet, well-dressed anticipation. Victoria herself was in the bridal suite, radiant, a little nervous, the way every bride is nervous in the final minutes before everything becomes real. The officiant was in position. The groomsmen were in position. Daniel stood at the front of the aisle, hands clasped, chin up, looking like a man who had never once doubted a decision he'd made in his life. Everything was exactly on schedule. And then a sound. Low, smooth, powerful. An engine that didn't belong to a town car or a hired sedan. An engine that announced itself without trying to. A few guests near the entrance turned their heads before the car even came to a full stop. The valet stepped forward out of habit, then stopped, just stood there, hand half raised, unsure whether to act or simply stare. The black Lamborghini sat at the velvet rope like it had every right to be there. The door swung open. First came a small boy in mustard yellow, stepping out onto the red carpet with bright eyes and zero hesitation. Then another, identical, grinning at nothing in particular, delighted just to be somewhere new. Then Emily. She stepped out in gold, straightened up slowly, and reached down to take both their hands. She didn't look around, didn't scan the crowd. She simply lifted her chin slightly and walked forward. The photographer hired to document the wedding captured it on pure instinct. His job was the ceremony. His camera moved anyway. The guests near the entrance went quiet first. Then the silence traveled. Row by row, the soft murmuring of 300 people dissolved into something still and electric, moving backward through the crowd the way a wave moves, slow and unstoppable. Phones came out, heads turned. Nobody told them to, they just did. At the front of the aisle, Daniel felt the shift before he understood it, the change in the air, the way the music suddenly felt too loud against the silence spreading behind him. He didn't turn around right away. Then the man standing beside him leaned in close. 3 words, quiet, careful. She brought children. Daniel turned. And the version of this moment he had spent months imagining, Emily arriving small and humbled and grateful just to be included, disappeared completely. Because the woman walking toward him wasn't any version of Emily he had prepared for. And the 2 boys holding her hands were looking around the garden with their father's eyes. Emily walked the way she had learned to walk through the hardest years of her life. Chin slightly up, shoulders relaxed, one step at a time, like the ground beneath her was solid and always had been. Noah held her left hand. Nathan held her right. They smiled because they were 5 years old, and this was just a fancy party, and the flowers were pretty, and there were a lot of people looking at them, which was exciting rather than frightening when you were 5 and had no idea what any of it meant. Emily smiled because she had survived the man standing 30 feet in front of her, and he had absolutely no idea how completely. Daniel's face did something no wedding photographer had ever been hired to capture. His hand rose slowly to his mouth. His eyes moved from her face to the boys, then back to her face again, then back to the boys. She watched him do the math. She could see it happening. The age, the timing, the way Nathan tilted his head when he was curious about something, the same way Daniel tilted his, a detail Emily had noticed years ago and quietly filed away, never intending to use it as anything except a private ache. Now 300 people were watching Daniel Whitmore notice it too. Victoria appeared at his side from a side entrance, bouquet in both hands, ready for her procession. She looked at her fiancé first, then followed his gaze down the aisle. She saw Emily. She saw the twins. She saw Daniel's expression. Her bouquet dropped exactly 3 inches. The music continued for a few more seconds. Then it faltered. The musician glanced up, read the room, and let the notes fade quietly into the garden air. Victoria turned to Daniel. Her voice was low, controlled, the voice of a woman who understood optics and was using every ounce of that understanding just to keep her face composed. "Who are those boys?" Daniel said nothing. There was no answer available to him that didn't detonate the next 10 minutes entirely. Every option led to the same place. He stood there, in his custom tuxedo, in front of everyone he had ever wanted to impress, and said absolutely nothing. Emily did not look at him. She found her seat, the front row seat he had personally reserved for her, close enough to watch every second, and sat down with the quiet ease of someone arriving exactly where they intended to be. She settled Noah on her left, Nathan on her right, smoothed her golden dress, folded her hands in her lap, and waited. The ceremony that Daniel Whitmore had spent months engineering as the greatest moment of his life never properly found its footing again. The room had stopped breathing, and the woman he had invited to be humiliated was the only person in it who looked completely at peace. Victoria left before the vows were spoken. She didn't make a scene, didn't raise her voice or throw her bouquet or say anything that the guests standing nearby could clearly repeat later. She simply turned, placed the flowers into the nearest bridesmaid's hands, and walked toward a side exit with her chin up and her back straight. The way women leave when they have seen enough and have too much dignity to pretend otherwise. The venue came apart quietly at first, then all at once. Whispers became questions. Questions became movement. Phones that had already been recording found new angles. 300 guests who had arrived for a wedding found themselves witnesses to something else entirely. Daniel walked outside. Emily was by the Lamborghini. The boys were on the lawn nearby, chasing each other through the garden in their mustard shirts, completely unbothered by everything happening around them, laughing at something only they understood, the way twins sometimes do. Daniel stopped a few feet from her. He looked older than she remembered, not in years, in something else, something heavier. "Emily, I'm not here for a conversation, Daniel." He looked at the boys. Nathan caught him looking and waved cheerfully before running in the other direction. The casual innocence of it seemed to hit Daniel somewhere he wasn't prepared for. "Are those?" He stopped, couldn't finish it. Emily looked at him steadily. "Yes." He sat down on the marble steps behind him, slowly, like his legs had simply decided they were done holding him up. A billionaire in a bespoke tuxedo, sitting on the steps of his own ruined wedding, unraveling in slow motion while the world filmed it from a distance. Emily picked up her sons and went home. 3 days later, he knocked on her apartment door. No lawyers this time, no prepared words. He came with a medical report he had finally, years too late, faced. The results were clear. The infertility had always been his, not hers. It had never been hers. Emily already knew. Her doctor had told her years ago. She had carried that truth quietly and chosen never to use it as a weapon. She made him tea anyway, let him talk, let him cry, watched him fall apart at her kitchen table without feeling any need to put him back together. When he finally went quiet, she looked at him calmly. "I forgive you," she said, "not because you deserve it, because I'm not willing to carry that weight anymore." He nodded, he left. She closed the door behind him. Noah came running in from the hallway, sock-footed and bright-eyed. "Mama, who is that?" She looked at her son, beautiful, whole, completely hers. "Nobody important, baby." She smiled. "Thanks for staying with this story right till the final moment. You're the reason these stories come alive. If you're ready for another powerful journey, just tap the next video on your screen. And before you go, leave a quick comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I'm excited to see your thoughts and connect with you down there.